You've been told to stay strong when everything inside you is falling apart. You've been told to be patient when your world was collapsing in silence. You've been told to keep going when you didn't even know why you were still standing. And somewhere along the way, you started pretending you are fine, pretending you are not tired, pretending you don't feel that pressure in your chest every time you think about where you are in life right now. But let's stop pretending for a second, because this moment right here is not about pretending anymore. This is the moment you stop lying to yourself, because deep down you already know something has to change. You already feel it. That quiet frustration when you look at your life and realize you are not where you thought you would be. That silent disappointment you don't say out loud when you see others moving forward while you feel stuck. That voice in your head late at night that keeps asking, is this really it? Is this all I am going to become? And the worst part is not the struggle outside, it is the war inside your own mind. One part of you wants more success, more respect, more control over your life. But the other part keeps pulling you back into comfort, into delay, into excuses that sound reasonable but slowly destroy your potential. And every day you don't choose, that gap inside you gets heavier. But hear me clearly right now, you are not weak. You are not broken. You are not lost. You are simply a moment where pressure is forcing a decision out of you, because life does not ask forever. It eventually demands a direction, forward or backward, growth or decline, discipline or regret, growth or decline, discipline or regret. And maybe nobody told you this, but your life is not going to change because time passes. It will only change when you decide that enough is enough. When you stop negotiating with your potential. When you stop allowing your emotions to control your actions. When you stop waiting for the right mood to start building the life you keep dreaming about. Because the truth is, everything you want is on the other side of what you keep avoiding. The discipline you ignore. The fear you run from. The discomfort you refuse to sit in. That is the doorway. Not motivation, not luck, not timing. Discipline. So right now, as you listen, don't treat this like just another speech. Don't treat it like background noise. Treat it like a mirror, because this is the moment you either wake up mentally or stay asleep in your own potential. And if something inside you is reacting right now, if something inside you feels uncomfortable, good. That means you are still alive inside. That means there is still something in you worth fighting for. Because what comes next is not just motivation. It is a reminder of who you were supposed to become all along. Your lowest point is not your final point. And most people never truly understand how powerful that truth is until life forces them to the ground, until everything they thought was stable collapses. Until the noise around them disappears and all that remains is their own thoughts echoing inside a broken moment. That's where most people quit. Not because they are weak, but because they misunderstand what the lowest point actually means. They think it is a message saying what the lowest point actually means. They think it is a signal saying you are done, when in reality it is a signal saying you are being rebuilt. When light pushes you down, it doesn't always do it to destroy you. Sometimes it strips you of distractions. It removes the people who were never meant to stay. It breaks the habits that were slowly killing your future. It exposes the mindset that was holding you back while you were pretending everything was fine. And yes, it hurts. It shakes your confidence. It makes you question your worth. But pain is not proof of failure. Pain is proof that something in you is being challenged to grow beyond its current limit. The problem is not the fall. The problem is what you decide the fall means. Some people fall once and immediately label themselves as finished. They say things like, I can't recover. I always fail. Or this is just who I am. And the moment they accept that identity, they stop fighting. They turn a temporary situation into a permanent identity. But the truth is, your lowest point has no authority over your future unless you give it permission to define you. Every successful person you admire has been through a version of a lowest point, a moment where things didn't go according to plan, a moment where they lost something important, a moment where they felt embarrassed, rejected, defeated, or completely lost. The difference between those who rise and those who stay down is not talent. It is interpretation. One group interprets the lowest point as a stop sign. The other interprets it as a turning point. When you are at your lowest, you are actually closer to your rebuild than you realize. Because at the bottom, there is nowhere else to go but up. You lose the illusion that things will fix themselves. You lose the comfort of denial. You lose the distractions that were keeping you average. And in that stripped down version of life, you are finally left with something powerful. Truth. The truth about your habits, the truth about your decisions, the truth about your discipline. And once you see the truth clearly, you finally have the chance to change direction But let's be honest, the lowest point feels personal. It feels like life is targeting you. It feels like you are being punished while others are moving forward. You start comparing your behind the scenes struggle with someone else's highlight reel. And that comparison creates emotional weight. It makes you feel isolated. But isolation is not always rejection. Sometimes it is preparation. Because when you are isolated, you are not being distracted by opinions. You are not being pulled by outside noise. You are being forced into a space where you either rebuild yourself or remain broken. And this is where most people fail. Not because they cannot rise, but because they rush to escape the discomfort instead of learning from it. They try to numb it. They try to avoid it. They try to distract themselves from it. But discomfort is the classroom of transformation. If you avoid it, you also avoid growth. If you run from it, you also run from your comeback. Your lowest point is not asking you to stay there forever. It is asking you to pay attention. What choices led you here? What habits created this situation? What mindset allowed this to happen? These are not questions meant to shame you. They are questions meant to wake you up. Because awareness is the first step of rebuilding anything. You cannot fix what you refuse to see. And here is the truth. Most people don't want to hear. Your comeback does not start when life gets easier. It starts when you get honest. Honest about your discipline. Honest about your effort. Honest about your excuses. The moment you stop protecting your pride and start confronting your reality is the moment your life begins to shift. At your lowest point, you also discover something dangerous and powerful at the same time. You realize you can survive more than you thought. You realize that even after disappointment, you are still breathing. Even after failure, you are still capable of standing up again. That realization is the foundation of resilience, because once you know you survived your worst moment, you stop fearing future challenges the same way. But survival alone is not the goal. The goal is transformation. You are not meant to stay in survival mode forever. You are meant to use survival as evidence that you can rebuild something stronger than what existed before, The version of you that existed before the fall was limited by ignorance, habits, and untested discipline. The version you build after the fall can be sharper, wiser, more focused, and more intentional. The lowest point removes illusions. It removes fake confidence. It removes superficial identity, and what remains is raw potential. Potential that has not yet been shaped by discipline, but has now been awakened by experience. That is why your lowest point is not your final point. It is your starting point in disguise. You do not rise by pretending the fall didn't happen. You rise by using it. You take the lessons, the pain, the clarity, and you convert them into action. Because action is the bridge between where you are and where you want to be. And without action, even the deepest realization means nothing. So when life tries to convince you that your lowest point is your identity, you must reject that idea completely. You must remind yourself that this is a chapter, not the whole story. This is a season, not your destiny. This is a moment, not your definition. Because the truth is simple but powerful. You are not finished. You are not defeated. You are not stuck forever. You are in transition. And if you choose to stand up, if you choose to fight back, if you choose to rebuild with discipline instead of emo, is teaching, then your lowest point will not be remembered as your ending. It will be remembered as the exact moment everything changed. Pain is something most people try to escape as quickly as possible. But what they don't realize is that pain is not the enemy. Pain is evidence. It is proof that you are still in the fight, still in the arena, still in the game of becoming something greater than what you were yesterday. The moment you stop feeling pain is not always a sign of victory. Sometimes it is a sign that you have stopped trying, stopped pushing, stopped growing, because anything that grows, anything that evolves, anything that breaks limits will inevitably come into contact with resistance, and that resistance is what we call pain. People misunderstand pain because they associate it only with suffering. They think pain means something is going wrong. But in reality, pain is often the most honest signal that something is going right. When you go to the gym and lift weights, your muscles burn. That burn is not a warning to stop. It is a confirmation that change is happening. Without that resistance, your body would remain the same. Without that strain, there will be no growth. The same principle applies to life. Emotional pain, mental pressure, setbacks, disappointment, rejection, and failure are not signs that you should quit. They are signs that you are actively pushing beyond your current version. The truth is, every person who avoids progress, because progress and discomfort are connected. You cannot separate them. If you want a stronger mind, you will face mental resistance. If you want a better life, you will face emotional challenges. If you want success, you will face failure before achievement. Pain is not the opposite of success. It is part of the path toward it, but most people are not prepared for that reality. So when pain shows up, they interpret it as a stop sign instead of a training signal. What makes pain so powerful is not just the feeling itself, but what it reveals about your current limits. Pain shows you where you are weak. It exposes where you are unprepared. It highlights where your discipline is lacking and where your mindset still needs development. In that sense, pain is like a mirror. It reflects your current state without lies. It does not care about your excuses. It does not care about your intentions. It simply shows you the truth of your capacity in real time. And this is why many people fear pain, not because it is unbearable, but because it is honest. It removes illusion. It destroys false confidence. It forces you to confront the version of yourself you were trying to avoid seeing. But if you can learn to stay in that discomfort long enough, something powerful begins to happen. You stop seeing pain as punishment and start seeing it as instruction. Every moment of pressure becomes a lesson. Every setback becomes feedback. Every struggle becomes information that helps you adjust, improve, and rise again. There is also a deeper layer to pain that most people ignore. Pain confirms effort. You do not feel pain sitting still. You do not feel pain when you are avoiding challenges. You feel pain when you are trying, when you are pushing, when you are stepping into uncertainty. That means pain is actually proof that you are not giving up, even if you are struggling, even if you are failing, even if you are barely holding on. The fact that you feel the weight means you are still engaged in the process of change. Think about the times in life when you felt emotionally drained, mentally exhausted, or physically overwhelmed. Those were not moments of weakness. Those were moments of engagement. You were actively trying to become something different from what you were. And that attempt is what? Creating resistance. If you were not trying, there would be no resistance. If you were not moving forward, there would be no friction. So in a strange but powerful way, pain is evidence of movement. But here is where the real battle begins. Most people confuse pain with permanent identity. They think because something hurts right now, it will always hurt. Because they are struggling today, they will always struggle. Because they failed once they are defined by failure. And that thinking traps them and locks them into a mental cycle where pain is not temporary feedback, but permanent definition. And once pain becomes identity, growth stops completely. The strongest people in the world are not the ones who avoid pain. They are the ones who reinterpret it. They learn to ask different questions. Instead of asking, why is this happening to me? They ask, what is this building in me? Instead of saying, I can't handle this, they say, this is strengthening me. Instead of saying, I can't handle this. Instead of seeing pain as a barrier, they see it as resistance training for life, because they understand that anything worth building will demand endurance. Pain also has a way of filtering people. It separates those who are serious from those who are temporary. When things get hard, many people step back. They retreat into comfort. They choose the easier path. But the ones who stay, the ones who continue despite discomfort, are the ones who eventually transform. Not because they are immune to pain, but because they are willing to carry it long enough for it to turn into strength. There is a moment in every transformation where pain peaks, where everything feels heavy, where quitting feels logical. That moment is critical, because that is the moment where most people exit. But if you stay a little longer, if you push just a little further, something shifts. The pain does not disappear instantly, but your relations, with it changes. It stops controlling you. It stops intimidating you. It becomes something you can carry without breaking. And once you reach that stage, you realize something life-changing. Pain was never the problem. Your interpretation of pain was, because pain itself is neutral. It does not decide your outcome. It does not determine your destiny. It simply exists as a signal. The meaning you attach to it determines whether you rise or fall. When you start embracing pain as proof that you are still alive and still fighting, everything changes. You stop running from challenges. You stop avoiding from challenges. You stop avoiding for shortcuts that bypass growth. Instead, you start respecting resistance. You start welcoming struggle as part of your development. You understand that every difficult moment is shaping you into someone stronger than the version of you that existed before. And slowly pain loses its power to break you. Not because life becomes easier, but because you become stronger. You become trained, you become conditioned through experience. You stop fearing pressure because you have survived it before. You stop doubting yourself because you have already proven you can endure. That is the hidden gift of pain. It does not come to destroy you. It comes to reveal you. It shows you what you are capable of when quitting is not an option. It exposes strength you did not know you had. It builds endurance that comfort could never teach you. And most importantly, it confirms one powerful truth. You are still here, still fighting, still capable of becoming more than what you were. So when pain shows up, do not misread it. Do not run from it. Do not let it define you in a negative way. Instead, recognize it for what it truly is, a signal that you are in motion. A sign that you are pushing boundaries, a reminder that you are still in the fight for your future, because the moment you feel pain, you are not losing. You are proving that you are still alive enough to win. Nobody is coming to save you, and that truth is uncomfortable for most people because it removes the fantasy that someone somewhere is going to step in and fix everything they refuse to fix themselves. It removes the idea that help will magically arrive at the perfect time. That opportunity will knock twice. That rescue is guaranteed if you just wait long enough. But life does not work like that. Life rewards action, not wait. Life responds to responsibility, not excuses. And the sooner you understand that, the sooner your entire direction begins to change. Most people live their lives in a quiet form of delay. They delay discipline because they think motivation will show up tomorrow. They delay growth because they think circumstances will become easier later. They delay decisions because they hope someone will guide them. And in that delay, days turn into months, months turn into years, and suddenly they wake up wondering why nothing has changed. But nothing changed because they were waiting for something outside themselves to take ownership of their life. The harsh reality is that no one feels your urgency the way you do. No one wakes up inside your problems. No one experiences your thoughts, your pressure, your fear, your goals the way you do. That means no one else carries the responsibility of fixing your situation. Your family can support you. Your friends can encourage you. Mentors can guide you. But at the end of the day, execute still belongs to you. Transformation still belongs to you. Change still belongs to you. Change still belongs to you. And this is where people either rise or break, because once you accept that no one is coming, you are forced into a position of responsibility. You can no longer blame timing. You can no longer blame people. 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 Chances. You are left with only one direction. Take control. And that moment, although uncomfortable, is the beginning of power. The biggest danger in waiting for someone to save you is that it slowly weakens your sense of urgency. You stop moving with purpose because you secretly believe help is coming. You stop building discipline because you assume things will eventually fall into place. You stop pushing yourself because you think someone will recognize your potential and unlock it for you. But potential without action is just wasted energy. It is unused capacity. It is unrealized strength. Look at every area of life. Nobody is coming to save your habits. Nobody is coming to wake you up early. Nobody is coming to force you to study, train, or improve. Nobody is coming to replace your distractions with discipline. If you do not take control of your daily actions will control you. And that is why so many people stay stuck. Not because they lack ability, but because they lack ownership. Ownership is the turning point. The moment you say, this is my responsibility, everything shifts. Your mindset sharpens. Your excuses weaken. Your private ministry sucks. Your focus becomes more serious because now you understand that every decision has weight. Every hour has value. Every action is either building your future or delaying it. There is no neutral ground anymore. And yes, this realization can feel heavy at first. It can feel like pressure because suddenly you are no longer allowed to shift responsibility away from yourself. But that pressure is not there to crush you. It is there to activate you because pressure is what forces potential to surface. Without pressure, nothing develops. Without responsibility, nothing matures. Without accountability, nothing grows. You have to understand something critical. Waiting is also a decision. Doing nothing is still an action. Staying stuck is still a choice. Every day you choose not to change something, you are silently choosing to remain the same. And over time, that silent choice becomes a lifestyle. That is how people end up years later in the same position, asking how they got there without realizing they built it through inaction. Nobody is coming to save your discipline. Nobody is coming to build your mindset. Nobody is coming to fight your internal battles. Those battles are yours alone. And the moment you stop expecting rescue is the moment you begin developing strength. Because strength is not built in comfort. It is built in responsibility. It is built when you realize that if something is going to change, you are the only one who can change it. There is also a hidden power in accepting this truth. It frees you. At first, it feels like pressure, but underneath that pressure is liberation. Because when you stop waiting for others, you stop depending on uncertain outcomes. You stop attaching your progress to other people's actions. You stop building your future on things you cannot control. Instead, you begin focusing entirely on what you can control. Your effort, your discipline, your mindset, your consistency. That shift changes everything. You stop asking, when will things change for me? And start asking, what can I change right now? You stop hoping for opportunities and start building skills that attract opportunity. You stop waiting for motivation and start creating systems that force action. You stop living in reaction and start living in direction. And once you enter that state, you begin to realize something powerful. You were never actually powerless. You were just waiting. You were just delaying your own authority over your life. You were just outsourcing responsibility, the time, to people, to circumstances. But when you take it back, when you reclaim ownership, your energy changes completely. Still, this truth separates people. Some hear nobody is coming to save you and feel discouraged. Others hear it and feel activated. The difference is mindset. One group interprets it as abandonment. The other interprets it as empowerment. One group feels alone. The other feels awakened. One group stops. The other starts moving with urgency, because urgency changes everything. When you know no one is coming, you stop wasting time. You stop overthinking simple actions. You stop delaying what you already know you should do. You stop negotiating with laziness. You stop waiting for perfect conditions. You start acting in imperfect conditions and improving as you go. And that is where real growth begins, not in waiting, not in hoping, not in imagining, but in doing. Even when it is hard, even when it is inconvenient, even when no one is watching, even when results are not immediate, because consistency is what builds identity, and identity is what builds destiny. At some point, you have to stop thinking someone will arrive to change your life and accept the responsibility of your life changes when you change, when your habit changes, when your mindset changes. When your mindset changes, when your discipline changes, that is when everything around you begins to shift. Nobody is coming to save you, but that is not bad news. That is the moment you realize you are not waiting for a hero anymore. You are becoming one through your own actions, your own decisions, your own discipline. And once you accept that fully, once you stop waiting and start moving, there's nothing in your way except the version of you that has not yet evolved. And that version only disappears the moment you decide to rise. Your past does not define your future. And yet this is one of the hardest truths for people to fully accept, because the past feels so real, so heavy, and so permanent in memory that it convinces them they are trapped inside it. But the past is not a prison unless you keep walking back into it mentally every single day. It is not a chain unless you keep using it as proof that you cannot change. It is not a final judgment unless you decide to treat it like one. In reality, your past is simply information. It is experience. It is a record of what happened, not a prophecy of what must happen next. Most people carry their past like an identity instead of carrying it like a lesson. They say things like, this is just who I am, based on what they used to do, what they used to believe, or what they used to fail at. But that version of you was built with limited awareness, limited discipline, and limited understanding. You were operating with what you knew at that time. And what you knew at that time is not the same as what you know now or what you are capable of learning moving forward. So why would a past version of you have the authority to define a future version of you that does not even exist? Yet the problem is not that people have a past. Everyone has one. The problem is attachment. They attach emotion, identity, and limitation to events that are no longer active. A mistake becomes a label. A failure becomes a title. A bad decision becomes a lifelong identity. And once identity is built on past experience instead of present potential, growth becomes extremely difficult, because every attempt to change feels like going against who I am instead of stepping into who I can become. But here's the truth that changes everything. Your past only has power if you keep repeating it in the present. The moment you stop repeating the same patterns, the past loses influence. The moment you stop feeding old habits, they stop shaping your future. The moment you start making different decisions, you start creating a different direction. Life does not ask you to erase your past. It asks you to outgrow it. Think about how people change physically over time. The body does not stay the same forever. Cells renew, strength can be built, health can be restored. Even after damage, the body can adapt and recover, and given the right conditions, the mind works in a similar way. It can be rebuilt, it can be retrained, it can be retrained, it can be redirected, but only if you stop treating your past as a permanent sentence and start treating it as a starting point for transformation. The strongest people in life are not the ones who never made mistakes. They are the ones who stop letting mistakes decide their identity. They acknowledge what happened, they learn from it, and then they move forward with a different level of awareness. They don't deny the past, but they also don't live inside it. They extract a lesson and leave the limitation behind. One of the biggest traps people fall into is emotional memory. The mind replays old failures and attaches emotion to them as if they are still happening. A moment from years ago still feels alive because it is constantly rehearsed mentally. And every time it is replayed, it reinforces a belief. I am not good enough. I always fail. I cannot change. But those are not facts. They are interpretations. And interpretations can be rewritten through new evidence. That is where action becomes critical, because the only way to break the authority of a negative past is to create a stronger present. You can not think your way out of a past identity without behaving your way into a new one. Every disciplined action you take today is a vote for a new version of you. Every time you do what you previously avoided, you weaken the old identity. Every time you show up when you used to quit, you rewrite the internal narrative. Your future is not built by your memories. It is built by your habits. And habits are formed in the present moment. That means every day you are either reinforcing your past or building your future. There is no neutral position. Even in action is a decision that supports the old pattern. But intentional action, even small action, begins to shift direction. Many people stay stuck because they wait for the past to stop affecting them before they start changing. But it does not work that way. The past does not release you first. You release the past by changing your behavior now. Freedom is not something you receive. It is something you build through repetition of new choices. There's also a powerful truth most people overlook. Your past includes both failure and survival. You are still here. You are still functioning. You have already survived every difficult moment that once felt impossible. That means your past is not only evidence of mistakes, it is also evidence of resilience. If you survived what you thought would break you, then you already carry proof that you are stronger than you think. That strength can be used again, but this time with intention. The moment you stop identifying only with what went wrong and start recognizing what you endured, your perspective shifts. You stop seeing yourself as broken and start seeing yourself as capable of rebuilding. That shift in identity is where transformation begins, because you cannot build a new future while still believing you are permanently damaged by the old one. Another important reality is that people often exaggerate the importance of their past because it is familiar. Even painful familiarity feels safer than unknown possibility. So they stay attached to what they already know, even if it hurts them, because stepping into change feels uncertain. But uncertainty is not danger. It is potential. It is space for something new to exist. Growth requires leaving the comfort of known identity. It requires stepping into a version of yourself that does not yet feel familiar. That discomfort is normal. It is not a sign to stop. It is a sign that transformation is in progress. Every time you act outside your old identity, you create friction between who you were and who you are becoming. And that friction is what reshapes you. You are not required to become your past. You are required to learn from it. You are not required to stay defined by old mistakes. You are required to use them as information. And once you understand that difference, everything becomes more flexible. You realize you are not locked into a single narrative. You're the one writing it continuously. At any moment, you can decide to stop repeating what broke you and start building what strengthens you. That decision is always available. It does not depend on timing. It does not depend on permission. It only depends on willingness. So when your mind tries to pull you back into old memories, old labels, old failures, you must remember that is not your identity. That is your history. And history can be learned from, but it does not have to be lived again. The future is not asking you to forget where you came from. It is asking you to stop living like you are still there, because you are not there anymore. You are here. And in this moment, you still have the power to choose differently, act differently, and become something your past never predicted. Motivation is temporary, it comes and goes like weather. Oh, midday you feel unstoppable, full of energy, full of belief, ready to change your entire life. The next day you feel empty, distracted, tired, and unsure why you even started. And this is where most people lose themselves, because they build their entire identity on something that was never meant to be stable. Motivation was never designed to carry your life. It was only designed to start the fire, not keep it burning. That is why discipline is strong. Discipline is what keeps you moving when motivation disappears. Discipline is what holds your future together when your emotions fall apart. The problem with relying on motivation is that it depends on feeling, and feelings are unstable. They shift based on sleep, stress, environment, failure, success, or even simple mood changes. If your progress depends on how you feel, then your progress will always be inconsistent. One good day followed by 3 wasted days. One strong week followed by a complete collapse. That is not growth. That is repetition of inconsistency, and inconsistency destroys potential more than failure ever will. Discipline removes feeling from the equation. It replaces emotion with structure. It replaces I feel like it when I said I would. And that shift changes everything. Because the moment you stop negotiating with yourself, the moment you stop asking permission from your emotion, you step into a higher level of control. You are no longer reacting to your mood. You are executing a decision. That is what separates people who dream from people who become. Most people misunderstand discipline because they think it is about intensity. They think discipline means doing something extreme for a short period of time. But real discipline is not loud. It is not emotional. It is not dramatic. Real discipline is quiet consistency. It is doing the same right things repeatedly, even when there is no applause. Say, no excitement and no immediate reward. It is showing up when nobody is watching. It is continuing when nothing feels inspiring. It is staying consistent when results are not visible yet. The truth is, discipline is built in moments where nobody is clapping for you. It is built in the early mornings when you don't feel like getting up. It is built in the late nights when you still choose to prepare instead of distract yourself. It is built in these small decisions that seem insignificant in the moment, but compound into life-changing outcomes over time. Every time you choose discipline over comfort, you are depositing strength into your future. Motivation says start when you feel ready. Discipline says start because it needs to be done. Motivation says wait for the right moment. Discipline says create the moment. Motivation depends on inspiration. Discipline depends on identity, and identity is far more powerful because it becomes who you are, not just what you do temporarily. When you rely on motivation, you constantly restart your life. You wait for another emotional spark to begin again. But when you rely on discipline, you never stop. You continue even when energy is low. You continue even when clarity is missing. You continue even when progress feels invisible. And over time, that continuation builds momentum that motivation could never sustain. Momentum is powerful because it reduces resistance. The hardest part of anything is starting, but discipline ensures you don't have to keep starting over. It keeps you in motion long enough for results to appear. And once results appear, belief strengthens. And once belief strengthens, action becomes easier. That cycle only begins through discipline, not motivation. There is also a deeper truth. Discipline builds trust within yourself. Every time you do what you said you would do, you strengthen internal trust. Begin to believe in your own word. You begin to rely on yourself. And that self-trust becomes confidence. Not the kind of confidence that depends on external validation, but the kind that comes from evidence. But the kind that comes from evidence, you know you will show up because you always have. On the other hand, every time you break promises to yourself, even small ones, you weaken that trust. You start doubting your own decisions. You start questioning your own ability. You start relying more on external motivation because internally you no longer trust yourself to stay consistent. That is why discipline is not just about success. It is about identity. It shapes how you see yourself. People often wait for motivation to feel ready, but readiness is not a feeling. Readiness is a decision backed by repetition. Nobody ever feels fully ready to change their life. Nobody ever feels completely confident before starting something difficult. That feeling comes after action, not before it. Discipline forces action first, and confidence follows later. Think about every strong person you admire. They did not build their life on motivation alone. They built it on repetition, on doing what needed to be done regardless of mood, on showing up when it was inconvenient, on continuing when it was uncomfortable. That consistency is what created their strength. Not bursts of energy, but long-term commitment to structure. Discipline also protects you from your worst moments, because when motivation is gone, you are most vulnerable to quitting. You are most likely to give up when emotions are low. But discipline acts like a system that carries you through those low points. It removes decision fatigue. It removes emotional negotiation. It simply says, this is what we do regardless of how we feel. And that is where transformation lives, not in motivation, but in repetition without excuse. The person you become is shaped more by what you repeat than what you start. Starting is easy. Staying consistent is where most people fail. And discipline is what allows you to stay when everything inside you wants to stop. Another powerful aspect of discipline is that it creates freedom. This sounds contradictory, but it is true. When you are disciplined, you are no longer controlled by chaos. You are no longer trapped in emotional instability. You are no longer reacting to life randomly. You are building it intentionally. That structure creates freedom because it reduces confusion and regret. You know what you are doing and why you are doing it. Without discipline, life becomes reactive. You respond to distractions. You follow impulses. You delay important things for temporary comfort. And over time, that creates frustration because you feel out of control. But discipline restores control. It gives you direction even when emotions are unstable. At some point, you must understand this clearly. Motivation will not save your future. Motivation will not build your body, your skills, your career, or your mindset. Discipline will. Because discipline continues when motivation disappears. And everything meaningful in life requires continuation, not temporary effort. So the question is not whether you feel like changing. The question is whether you are willing to act without feeling like it. Whether you are willing to show up when it is boring. Whether you are willing to stay consistent when nobody is rewarding you yet. That is the real test, because your future is not built in moments of excitement. It is built in moments of discipline. And the more you choose discipline over emotion, the more unstoppable you become. Not because life gets easier, but because you become someone who no longer depends on ease to move forward. Every setback carries hidden strength inside it, but most people never discover that. T-strength, because all they can see in the moment is loss, disappointment, and frustration. A setback feels like something has been taken away from you. It feels like progress has been reversed. It feels like time has been wasted and effort has been destroyed. But that perception is incomplete, because what looks like destruction on the surface is often reconstruction underneath. What feels like an ending is often a redirection. What feels like failure is often hidden development that you only understand later, when you are strong enough to see it clearly. The human mind is naturally trained to focus on what is visible. So when a setback happens, attention immediately locks onto what went wrong. The missed opportunity, the broken plan, the failed attempt, the rejection, the loss. And in that moment, emotions take over logic. You start interpreting the situation as proof that you are not capable, not ready, or not good enough. But setbacks are not just divine your ability. They are designed to reveal your adaptability. And adaptability is something you only discover under pressure. Every setback forces you into a position of reflection, whether you want it or not. When things go smoothly, people rarely question their habits or their decisions. Comfort creates blindness, and success without struggle often creates overconfidence. But setbacks interrupt that illusion. They force you to stop and examine what you were doing, how you were thinking, and where your approach was flawed. That reflection is uncomfortable, but it is also powerful because it exposes the exact areas that need growth. Hidden strength is not something that appears instantly during a setback. It is something that gets activated through response. Two people can experience the same failure, but walk away with completely different outcomes. One person walks away defeated, convinced that the setback cold. Firms get limitations. The other person walks away sharper, more aware, more disciplined, and more strategic. The difference is not the event itself. The difference is interpretation and response. Setbacks do not determine strength. They reveal how strength is built. When you are in the middle of a setback, it often feels personal. It feels like life is targeting you specifically. But setbacks are not personal attacks. They are universal experience of growth and correction. Every strong person has been corrected by failure. Every successful path has been shaped by moments that did not go according to plan. If everything worked perfectly on the first attempt, there would be no development of patience, resilience, or problem-solving ability. Setbacks exist to train those qualities. One of the most overlooked truths about setback is that they remove illusions. Before setback, people often operate with assumptions. They assume their strategy is correct. They assume their effort is enough. They assume their understanding is complete. But when a setback happens, those assumptions are challenged. And when assumptions break, truth appears. That truth may be uncomfortable, but it is essential for real improvement. You cannot grow in the direction of what you assume. You only grow in the direction of what you understand clearly. Setbacks also build mental endurance, not physical endurance alone, but emotional and psychological strength. Because when something goes wrong, you are forced to deal with pressure, uncertainty, and disappointment at the same time. You learn how to function while things are not perfect. You learn how to think under stress. You learn how to continue even when motivation disappears. These are not soft skills, they are survival skills for success. Without setbacks, you would never develop them. Another hidden strength inside setbacks is awareness of consequence. When things go wrong, you begin to understand the consequences of certain choices more deeply. You see clearly how one decision leads to another outcome. That awareness sharpens your judgment, makes you more careful, more intentional, and more strategic in future decisions. Without setbacks, people often repeat the same mistakes because nothing forced them to see the cost of those mistakes clearly. Setbacks also build humility, even if it arrives through discomfort. Success can sometimes inflate ego. It can make people believe they are above mistakes or immune to failure, but setbacks bring perspective back. They remind you that you are still learning, still developing, still refining your approach. That humility is not weakness, it is strength, because it keeps you open to improvement. A person who refuses to acknowledge mistakes cannot grow. A person who learns from them becomes stronger every time. There is also a hidden emotional strength that develops through setbacks, emotional resilience. At first, failure feels overwhelming. It feels like a collapse of confidence. But over time, as you experience setbacks and recover from them, something changes internally. You begin to realize that disappointment is temporary. You realize that emotions rise and fall, but they do not define your ability to continue. That realization reduces fear. And once fear reduces, courage increases. Setbacks also force creativity. When your original plan fails, you are pushed to think differently. You are forced to find alternative approaches, new strategies, and better solutions. Many people never discover their creativity because their first approach works just enough for them to stay comfortable. But when that approach fails, you are forced to innovate, and innovation only appears when familiar methods stop working. There is another truth that people often miss: setback. Six delay nothing that is meant for you. They only remove what is not aligned or not ready yet. Sometimes what you think is a loss is actually protection from something you were not prepared for. Sometimes the timing was wrong. Sometimes the foundation was weak. Sometimes the direction needed adjustment. A setback interrupts movement, not to punish you, but to correct the path. And in that correction, strength is formed. Because when you rebuild after a setback, you do not rebuild the same way. You rebuild with awareness. You rebuild with experience. You rebuild with caution and intelligence that you did not have before. That is why people who recover from setbacks often become stronger than they were before them, not because they avoided failure, but because they transformed through it. The real danger is not the setback itself, but the decision to stop growing because of it. If you allow a setback to convince you that you are finished, then you miss the strength it was trying to develop in you. But if you treat it as feedback, as training, as correction, then it becomes a turning point instead of an ending point. Every setback is asking you a silent question. Will you stop here, or will you use this? Will you interpret this as defeat or as development? Will you let this break you, or will you let it build you? Because inside every setback, there is information you did not have before, awareness you did not have before, and strength you did not have before. But you only gain access to it if you continue forward instead of shutting down. That is why setbacks are not the opposite of progress. They are part of progress itself. And once you understand that deeply, you stop fearing them in the same way. you stop seeing them as proof that you are failing and start seeing them as proof that you are in the process of becoming stronger than you were before. Stop explaining you. It's situation and start changing it, because explanation has become the hiding place for too many people who already know what they need to do but refuse to do it. The more they talk, the less they act. The more they justify, the less they transform. The more they describe their problems, the more comfortable they become living inside them. And slowly, without realizing it, explanation becomes a substitute for progress. Words replace action. Stories replace results, and excuses slowly become a lifestyle. The truth is, most people are not stuck because they don't understand their situation. They are stuck because they understand it too well, but refuse to take responsibility for changing it. They can explain exactly what went wrong. They can describe every detail of their struggle. They can list every reason why life is hard right now. But understanding your situation does not automatically change your situation. Awareness without action is just observation. And observation alone does not rebuild a life. When you keep explaining your situation over and over again, something subtle begins to happen in your mind. You start to believe that explanation equals effort. You feel like because you've described your pain, you've done something about it. You feel like because you've shared your struggle, you've made progress. But in reality, nothing has changed except your emotional release. You feel lighter for a moment, but your life remains exactly the same. And that is the trap. Relief replaces responsibility. At some point, you have to be honest with yourself. Nobody is coming to fix your situation through understanding alone. So nobody is coming to fix your situation through understanding alone. Nobody is going to be convinced by your explanation enough to transform your life for you. The world does not respond to your words as much as it responds to your actions. You are not rewarded for explaining why you are behind. You are behind. You are rewarded for doing something about it. Life does not negotiate with your reasons. It responds to your movement. There is a difference between awareness and transformation. Awareness says, I know what my problem is. Transformation says, I am actively changing it. Awareness can exist for years without improvement. People can be aware of their bad habits, their lack of discipline, their wasted time, their poor decisions, and still remain exactly the same. Why? Because awareness without execution creates comfort, not change. It tricks the mind into believing that knowing is enough. But knowing is not enough. You can know everything about discipline and still be lazy. You can know everything about success and still be broke. You can know everything about change and still remain unchanged, because knowledge without movement is just storage. It sits in your mind but never reaches your life. The gap between knowing and doing is where most people lose themselves. Stop explaining your situation, because explanation keeps you emotionally attached to it. Every time you repeat your struggle, you reinforce your identity as someone who is struggling. Every time you describe your failure, you deepen your connection to that failure. Every time you talk about what you lack, you train your mind to focus on lack instead of solutions. And what you focus on expands. So if your focus is constantly your situation becomes your identity. At some point, you have to break that cycle. You have to interrupt the pattern of talk without changing. You have to stop rehearsing your problems and start rehearsing solutions through action. Because action is what rewires identity, not explanation, not discussion, not analysis, action. Not discussion, not analysis, action. Every small step forward is a message to your brain that you are no longer the person who stays stuck. You are the person who moves. The uncomfortable truth is that many people already know what needs to be done. They don't need more advice. They don't need more explanations. They don't need more conversations about their situation. They need discipline. They need execution. They need to stop delaying what they already understand, because delay is not confusion. In most cases, delay is avoidance. And avoidance is a choice disguised as uncertainty. You have to understand something powerful. Your situation does not change when you talk about it more clearly. Your situation changes when your behavior changes. If your actions stay the same, your results will stay the same no matter how deeply you explain your circumstances. Your reality responds only to consistent effort in a new direction. That is the law of change. Behavior first, results follow. There is also a hidden danger in constantly explaining your situation to others. The more you explain, the more sympathy you receive. And sympathy can become addictive because it feels like support. It feels like understanding. But sympathy does not equal progress. People can feel bad for you and still not be able to change your life. And if you rely too much on sympathy, you risk becoming comfortable in your struggle instead of uncomfortable in your struggle instead of uncomfortable enough to escape it. Real change often begins in silence. In the moment you stop explaining and start working, in the moment you stop seeking validation for your struggle and start seeking discipline for your solution, because silence removes distraction. Silence removes excuses. Silence forces you to face your habits directly. And when there is no audience for your explanation, there is only you and your decision. That is where transformation begins. When you stop explaining your situation, you reclaim your energy. All the energy you used to spend justifying, defending, describing, and repeating your problems gets redirected into action. And that energy, when focused correctly, becomes powerful, it becomes progress, it becomes movement, it becomes change. You also begin to notice something important. When you shift from explanation to action, your confidence starts to rebuild, not because your situation has instantly changed, but because you are no longer powerless in it. Action restores control. Even small action creates momentum. And momentum creates belief, and belief strengthens discipline. That cycle only begins when explanation ends and execution starts. There will always be reasons to explain your situation. Life will always give you circumstances that feel unfair, difficult, or overwhelming. But reasons are not solutions. They are descriptions, and descriptions do not move your life forward. You have to choose whether you want to remain someone who describes their life or someone who directs it. Stop explaining your situation, not because your situation is irrelevant, but because your attention is valuable, Where you place your attention determines where your energy flows. And if your attention is constantly on problems, your energy remains trapped in them. But if your attention shifts to action, even imperfect action, your energy begins to break free from stagnation. The moment you stop talking about what is wrong and start working on what can be fixed, something changes inside you. You stop being a spectator of your life and start becoming the builder of it. You stop narrating your struggles and start rewriting your story through action. And slowly, without meaning to announce it, your life begins to shift, because the truth is simple but powerful. Explanation keeps you stuck, but execution sets you free. Comfort is the enemy of your comeback, and most people don't realize it because comfort doesn't feel dangerous at first. In fact, comfort feels safe, familiar, and emotionally easy. It gives you temporary peace. It removes pressure. It allows you to avoid discomfort, avoid risk, avoid failure, and avoid confrontation with your potential. But what feels like safety in the short term often becomes the reason for stagnation in the long term. Comfort does not destroy you suddenly. It slowly sedates your ambition until you stop moving, stop growing and stop growing and stop growing and stop challenging yourself. The biggest lie comfort tells you is that you still have time. It whispers that you can start tomorrow, that you can try later, that today doesn't matter that much. It convinces you that resting a little longer will not make a difference. And slowly, those moments of just a little longer become weeks, then months, then years. Not because you made one big wrong decision, but because you repeatedly chose ease over effort. Comfort doesn't attack your dreams directly. It delays them quietly until they begin to fade in your mind. Comfort feels good because it removes friction, but friction is exactly what builds strength. Without resistance, nothing develops. A body without challenge becomes weak. A mind without pressure becomes soft. A life without discomfort becomes stagnant. Growth is not born in ease. Growth is born in resistance and struggle, in moments where you are forced to push beyond what feels natural. Comfort eliminates that push, and in doing so, it eliminates progress. The problem is that comfort becomes addicted. Once your mind gets used to avoiding difficulty, it starts to resist anything that requires effort. You begin to choose the easier path automatically. You delay hard conversations. You avoid difficult tasks, you escape responsibility through distractions, and without noticing, your identity starts to shift from someone who pushes forward to someone who protects their comfort at all costs. And when comfort becomes identity, ambition weakens. There is a dangerous illusion that What creates the illusion of stability? You feel stable because nothing is challenging you. You feel calm because nothing is pushing you. But that calm is deceptive. It is not the calm of progress. It is the calm of inactivity. Real stability is built through discipline and action, not avoidance. Comfort gives you emotional ease, but steals long-term strength. It gives you peace today, but takes away power tomorrow. Every level of growth demands discomfort. There is no version of success, no version of achievement, no version of transformation that does not require you to step into uncertainty. The uncomfortable truth is that everything you want is located outside your comfort zone. Not slightly outside, but far enough that you must stretch, struggle, and evolve to reach it. And that means if you remain comfortable, you automatically remain the same. Most people confuse comfort with happiness, but happiness that comes from comfort alone is temporary. It fades quickly because it is not built on achievement or progress. Real fulfillment comes from growth, from effort, from becoming someone better than you were yesterday. That kind of fulfillment requires discomfort. It requires you to push when you don't feel like pushing. It requires you to act when your mind tells you to wait. It requires you to step forward when everything inside you wants to stay still. Comfort also weakens discipline because discipline is built through resistance and comfort removes resistance. When everything is easy, there's no reason to develop control over your habits. There's no reason to challenge your impulses. There's no reason to push through laziness or fatigue. But when discomfort enters your life, discipline becomes necessary. You are forced to act despite feelings. You are forced to move despite resistance. And in that process, strength is built. One of the most dangerous effects of comfort is that it disguises itself as self-care. People start believing that avoiding difficulty is taking care of themselves, when in reality they are avoiding growth. True self-care is not only rest and relaxation. True self-care is also discipline, structure, and doing what is necessary for your future, even when it feels hard in the present. Comfort without discipline creates weakness. Balance between rest and effort creates strength. Comfort also reduces urgency. When you are too comfortable, you stop feeling the pressure to change. You stop feeling the urgency to improve. You stop feeling the need to move quickly. And urgency is what drives transformation. Without urgency, people drift. They delay important actions. They lose momentum. They settle into routines that feel easy but produce no progress. Comfort slows time emotionally. And while time feels slow, life quietly moves forward without your growth. There is also a psychological trap inside comfort: avoidance of failure. People stay comfortable because it protects them from the risk of failure. If you don't try, you don't fail. If you don't push, you don't fall. But that protection comes at a cost, because if you never risk failure, you also never experience success. Comfort protects your ego, but destroys your potential. It keeps you safe from embarrassment, but also safe from achievement. The uncomfortable truth is that every person you admire has made peace with discomfort. They have learned to act despite it, to move through it, to grow inside it. They don't wait for life to feel easy before they take action. They take action knowing it will feel difficult. And that decision is what separates those who grow from those who remain stuck. Not talent, not intelligence, but tolerance or discomfort. Comfort will always try to pull you back. It will show up in different forms: procrastination, distraction, overthinking, delay, excuses, and emotional avoidance. It will convince you that you deserve rest before effort, pleasure before progress, ease before challenge. But if you follow it too often, you begin to build a life that looks peaceful on the surface but feels empty underneath. Breaking free from comfort is not about rejecting rest or ignoring balance. It is about refusing to let ease control your decisions. It is about choosing growth even when comfort is available. It is about recognizing that temporary discomfort leads to long-term strength, while permanent comfort leads to long-term regret. Every time you choose effort over ease, you weaken the power comfort has over you. Your comeback requires discomfort. There is no version of your transformation that happens inside safety. You cannot build discipline and comfort. You cannot build strength and ease. You cannot build momentum without resistance. Everything you want is waiting on the other side of discomfort, but you only reach it by moving through it, not avoiding it. So when comfort calls you back, when it tells you to slow down, when it tells you to slow down, when it tells you to postpone your growth, you have to recognize it for what it is. Not protection, not peace, not stability, but limitation disguised as safety. And once you see it clearly, you stop obeying it because your future is not built in comfort. Your comeback is not born in ease. Your private ministry sucks. Your transformation does not live in what feels safe. It lives in what feels uncomfortable, unfamiliar, and challenging. And the moment you choose that path repeatedly, comfort loses control and your comeback finally begins to take shape. You must outwork the version of you that gave up, because the real battle in your life is not against other people, not against circumstances, and not even against time. The real battle is against the version of you that already decided to quit at some point in the past. That version of you still exists in your habits, in your mindset, in your reactions, in your excuses, and in your comfort zones. And if you are not careful, that version will keep controlling your present decisions without you even realizing it. So the only way forward is not to argue with your past self, not to negotiate with it, but to completely outperform it through consistent action. The version of you that gave up was built under pressure, fear, doubt, and limitation. That version made decisions based on emotion, not discipline. It reacted instead of leading. It avoided instead of confronting. It chose comfort over challenge and temporary relief over long-term growth. And because of that, it created a certain level of failure or stagnation in your life. But that version is not your identity. It is your history. And history should never be allowed to dictate your future performance unless you allow it. The dangerous thing is that most people do not realize they are still living under the influence of that old version. They think they have changed just because time has passed. But time alone does not create transformation. You can wait for years and still carry the same mindset, the same habits, the same patterns of avoidance. So even though the calendar changes, the identity remains stuck. That is why effort is required, not occasional effort, not emotional effort, but deliberate, structured, repeated effort that directly contradicts the behavior of your former self to outwork. The version of you that gave up means you must study that version honestly. You must recognize where it stopped pushing, where it chose to quit, where it stopped believing, where it gave up on consistency, where it lowered standards. Because you cannot defeat what you refuse to acknowledge. Awareness is the first step. You cannot improve a shadow you are unwilling to face. Once you identify that version, the next step is simple but demanding. You must do everything it refused to do. If it stopped working when things got hard, you must continue when things get hard. If it avoided discipline, you must embrace discipline. If it chose distraction, you must choose focus. If it chose distraction, you must become someone who never breaks promises to itself. You must become someone who never breaks promises to yourself. That is how you begin to separate from your past identity, not through words, but through repeated behavior that contradicts it. The version of you that gave up is not stronger than you. It is just more familiar. It is comfortable because it already exists in your memory. It is easier to fall back into old habits than to build new ones. But familiarity is not truth. Just because something feels natural does not mean it is right for your future. Growth always feels unnatural at first. Discipline always feels uncomfortable at the beginning. But repetition turns discomfort into strength. Every time you choose discipline over laziness, you are sending a message to your old self that it no longer has control. Every time you show up when you don't feel like it, you are weakening the identity that used to quit. Every time you push through resistance, you are rewriting your internal standard. And slowly, through repetition, the old version loses influence over your decisions. But this requires honesty. You cannot pretend you have changed while still behaving like the version of you that gave up. Many people lie to tens, lives in small ways. They think about success, but act like their old habits. They dream about transformation, but continue daily routines that produce no growth. And that contradiction keeps them stuck because identity is not shaped by intention. It is shaped by repetition. To outwork your old self means you must be willing to go further than it was willing to go. If it stopped at discomfort, you must continue through discomfort. If it stopped at failure, you must continue after failure. If it stopped at failure, you must continue after failure. If it stopped at failure, you must continue after rejection. Because the gap between your current self and your future self is not talent. It is endurance. It is consistency. It is the willingness to keep going when your past version would have stopped. There is a powerful shift that happens when you stop comparing yourself to other people and start comparing yourself to your former self. Other people's journeys are distractions, but your past self is your real competition because that is the only version of you that actually set your limitations. That is the only version of you that decided what you could or could not handle at that time. And now you have the chance to prove it wrong. The moment you start outperforming your past self, something changes internally. You begin to build evidence that growth is possible. You begin to prove to yourself that change is not just an idea, but a process you are actively living. And that evidence becomes fuel. It strengthens belief. It increases confidence. It reduces doubt because you are no longer hoping to be better. You are active ministry sucks. You are actively becoming better through measurable action. But this process is not emotional. It is not based on motivation. It is based on discipline because your old self was also motivated at times. It also had moments of inspiration. It also had plans and intentions, but what it lacked was consistency. So the only way to surpass it is not through temporary excitement, but through daily execution that does not depend on feeling. There will be moments when the old version of you tries to return. It will show up in thoughts like skip today. It doesn't matter, start later, or you've done enough. Those thoughts are not random. They are echoes of the version of you that gave up. And if you listen to them, you reconnect with that identity. But if you ignore them and act anyway, you break that connection. Every disciplined action is a separation from your past limitations. Outworking your old self also requires patience because transformation is not instant. You will not destroy an old identity in one day. You weaken it over time. You replace it gradually. You override it through repetition. And slowly, the habits that once defined your weakness stop appearing in your behavior. Not because they disappear overnight, but because they are replaced by stronger patterns. The most powerful realization in this process is that you are not stuck with who you used to be. You are simply repeating it or replacing it. That is all identity is. Repetition creates identity. So if you want a new identity, you must create new repetition. And that repetition must be stronger than the repetition of your past self. At some point, you will realize that the version of you that gave up was never your true limit. It was just your past response to pressure. And now you have the ability to respond differently, stronger, more disciplined, more focused, more consistent. And with each new decision, you step further away from that old version and close to the person you are becoming. Because the truth is simple. Your past self only wins if you repeat it. But the moment you outperform it, it loses all authority over your future. The idea that your comeback must be louder than your failure is not about noise, not about ego, and not about proving anything to people who doubted you. It is about transformation so real, so deep, and so undeniable that your life itself becomes the evidence that you did not stay down where life tried to bury you. Failure has a voice. It speaks in memories. It repeats. Your mistakes, like a broken record, it reminds you of what you lost, what you wasted, what you didn't achieve, and who walked away when you were not strong enough to hold on. Failure tries to become your identity, but your comeback is your response to that voice. And the only way to silence it is not with words, but with result. When life breaks you, it does not just break your situation. It tries to break your belief in yourself. That is the real damage, because once you start believing you're finished, you stop moving, you stop trying, you stop trying. And that is where most people stay. Not because life defeated them, but because they accepted defeat internally. Your comeback being louder than your failure means you refuse to accept that internal surrender. It means every step you take forward is a contradiction to every thought that told you that you are done. It is you proving through action that your story did not end where your pain began. People remember failure easily. That is how the world works. They remember the mistake, the loss, the moment you failed. But they also remember something greater when it happens, when someone rises in a way that cannot be ignored. That is what a loud comeback is. It does not ask for attention. It demands recognition. It does not chase validation. It forces respect through consistency. When you rebuild yourself in silence, but your results start speaking, the world has no choice but to adjust its opinion of you. A loud comeback is not always public. Sometimes nobody sees the nights you spend rebuilding your mind. Nobody sees the discipline you force on yourself when no one is watching. Nobody sees the days you choose effort over emotion, or the moments you stop yourself from quitting when quitting feels easier. With all of that invisible work builds something visible later. And when it finally shows, it looks like luck to people who do not understand the cost, but you will know the truth. You will know that every silent struggle was building the voice of your comeback. You have to understand something deeply. Your failure already made noise and already got attention. It already told its story. Now it is your turn to respond, not with excuses, not with explanation, but with undeniable progress. Because explanations keep you stuck in the past, but progress drags you into the future. You do not need to convince people you have changed. You need to become so changed that they cannot recognize who you used to be. There is a version of you that gave up at some point. Maybe it gave up when things got too hard. Maybe it gave up when nothing seemed to work. Maybe it gave up when people stopped believing in you. That version of you still exists in memory, but it does not deserve control anymore. Your comeback must be louder than that version. Every time you wake up early when you don't feel like it, you are being louder. Every time you push through pain instead of escaping it, you are being louder. Every time you choose discipline over distraction, you are being louder. The world does not respect potential. The world respects proof, and your comeback is your proof. Not your intention, not your dreams, not your plans, but your actions repeated consistently until they become your identity. That is when your life becomes louder than your failure ever was. Because failure is temporary, but transformation is permanent when it is built on discipline. And here's the truth that most people avoid. Your comeback will require you to become uncomfortable for a long time. There is no instant redemption. There is no shortcut back to greatness. You have to rebuild piece by piece. And while you are rebuilding, nobody may clap for you, nobody may notice, but that is exactly where the strength is built. Because even when your success finally arrives, it will not be fragile. It will be built on pressure, patience, and persistence. A loud comeback also means you stop living in reaction to your past. You stop making decisions based on what hurt you. You stop limiting yourself based on what failed before. You stop shrinking because of old mistakes. Instead, you start moving like someone who has already accepted that the past happened, but refuses to live there anymore. That shift is everything. Because the moment you stop identifying with your failure, you start creating your future. And when your comeback finally reaches its peak, it will not just silence your failure, it will erase its authority over your mind. The memories will still exist, but they will no longer control your emotions. They will become proof of where you started, not where you stayed. That is the ultimate power when your past no longer scares you, but strengthens you. So understand this clearly. Your comeback is not supposed to be quiet. It is not supposed to be hidden. It is not supposed to be small. It is supposed to be so powerful that it rewrites every assumption made about you, including the ones you made about yourself. And when you finally rise, you will realize something powerful. You were never finished. You were just being prepared. Now listen to me closely, because this is where everything comes together. You don't need more time. You don't need perfect conditions, and you don't need the world to finally understand you. What you need is a decision. A real one, not the kind you make when you feel inspired, but the kind you make when everything inside you is tired, broken, and still willing to fight anyway. Because that is what separates people who talk about a comeback from the people who actually live one. You have already lost enough time waiting for things to get easier. You have already lost enough energy doubting yourself, overthinking every step and replaying your failures like they define who you are. But hear this clearly, your failure was never your identity. It was just an event. It was just a moment in your story, not the ending of it. And if it was a moment, then it can be followed by another moment, a stronger moment, a louder moment, a comeback moment. Nobody is coming to rebuild your life for you. Nobody is going to wake you up and push you toward greatness. That responsibility has always been yours. And yes, that truth is heavy, but it is also powerful, because it means your future is not in the hands of anyone else. It is still in your control. It always was. The same hands that failed can rise again. The same mind that doubted can learn to believe again. The same person who gave up once can decide right here, right now, to never give up again. Stop waiting for motivation. Stop waiting for confidence. Start moving with discipline, even when you feel empty. Because action is what rebuilds identity. Every small step you take forward is a message to your past that says you do not control me anymore. Every time you push through resistance, you are proving that your comeback is already in motion. Not tomorrow, not someday. Now, and let me remind you of something powerful. The world doesn't remember the people who stayed down. It remembers the ones who got back up when everything said they shouldn't. It remembers the ones who were counted out, written off, and still returned stronger than before. That is the kind of story you are capable of writing, but only if you stop living like a victim of your circumstances and start living like the creator of your transformation. Your private ministry sucks. Your comeback will not be comfortable. It will demand discipline when you feel lazy, strength when you feel weak, and focus when everything tries to distract you. But on the other side of that struggle is a version of you that you have not met yet. A stronger version, a sharper version, a version that does not recognize excuses anymore, only results. So before this ends, understand this. Your comeback is not something you wait for. It is something you build moment by moment, decision by decision, action by action. And if you choose it fully, if you commit without hesitation, then one day you will look back at this exact moment and realize this was the turning point. The moment everything changed, the moment you stopped breaking and started becoming unstoppable.